Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video we will be going through the 6 books that I read in September, and I'll show you guys my 3-month update on the HRYCED 2.0 challenge. So if you guys don't know, HRYCED 2.0 is the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do, hosted by QWERTY here on YouTube. It is a year-long reading challenge that has a bingo board of prompts. You have to black out the board to complete the challenge. This started in July. I started July 1st, and it runs all the way until July 1st the next year. But before we go into all the HRYCED stuff, let's go over the books that I've read in September. The first book that I read in September is There Will Be Other Summers by Tegan Anderson. I read an e-arc of this. This book came out, I believe, September 18th. If you haven't heard of this book, it follows 2 queer disabled people who meet in group therapy and kind of get to know each other and lean on each other to try to cope with their life. This happens over the course of an entire summer leading up to one of the characters' birthdays. I thought this book was beautifully written. I thought that it captures the intensity of loneliness and the feeling of not fitting in very well. I think that people, even if you're not queer or disabled, you could very easily relate to some of the themes and feelings that the characters were going through during this book. I also really loved how diverse these characters are. Usually in books, authors will choose like one diversity category to go into. Either they will be a person of color, or they will be disabled, or they will be queer. It's very rare to see all of those on top of each other, and I think it's great representation because those kinds of people exist in the world. I think that kind of representation is really important and really good because people aren't limited to one minority group. They don't just fit into one box. Some people will fit into multiple. And so seeing a disabled queer person of color as the main character in the book, I think was very important. That being said, I think that the writing did not really agree with me. It felt disjointed and a bit clunky, and it also felt like the prose was trying to be a bit more poetic than it was. And this book was very noticeably YA, so I wasn't really enjoying reading from Asher's point of view. It felt very young, felt very immature. I think she's like 16 in this, so it's understandable. Like, this is meant for younger readers, and I am not the intended audience, but I didn't really enjoy reading her points of view. I kept skipping over to Rin's point of view. I thought Rin's chapters were a lot easier to digest and a lot more fun to read. While it makes sense that Asher and Rin would start to lean on each other as being both queer disabled people, I think that the friendship got almost unhealthy and codependent, and there was also a huge highlight on Asher's savior complex. Overall, I rated this book 3 stars. I liked the character. I liked Rin. I liked the general premise of the book. I liked the representation that the book had, but the execution kind of fell flat for me. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot better when I was younger and in that target range. So I think it's a 3-star book. Middle of the road for me. Would be good depending on who it is. The next book that I read was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This book, I am sure you've probably heard of it. This is one of Book Talk's favorite books, favorite authors. But if you haven't, this follows a doctor. Her name's Brianna Ortiz, and she meets a new doctor that's working in her hospital named Jacob. At first, they're not really getting along, but then they kind of meet, they get talking, and you see the relationship and romance starting to bud. I was shocked at how much I liked this book. I am always really wary of books that get a lot of hype because I'm scared that it will get overhyped for me and that it just won't live up to it. But I loved this book. I loved that Jacob was not the stereotypical male main character. He was a socially anxious human being. He wasn't suave, badass character or the typical golden retriever boyfriend character that I see in most romances. He felt like a real person, although a little too altruistic, but his anxiety felt very accurate. It felt very real. I think that the yearning in this book was so good. The letters that they wrote to each other were adorable. The third act conflict, I kind of understand. It was believable. The one thing that I really wasn't a fan of in this book was the sheer amount of pop culture and TikTok references that were scattered through it. I don't like when my book has pop culture references. I like my books to be a little bit more timeless. So that kind of took me out of it, but it wasn't enough to ruin the book for me. The last quarter of the book absolutely destroyed me. It ripped me to shreds. I won't go into what I have listed on my review just because spoilers. I was crying on the plane reading this. I loved it so much. I rated this a 4.75 stars just because the TikTok references knocked it down the quarter star. The next book that I read was the Raven Boys graphic novel by Maggie Stiefvater. This was my very first graphic novel, so I had no idea what to expect. So this follows a group of friends who attend this academy, and they are on a quest to find this Welsh king that was supposedly buried near their town in Virginia. To find this king, they enlist the help of the daughter of the town psychic, and they go on this whole adventure and journey looking for him. This is book 1 in the series. The artistic choices that they made in this book were beautiful. The psychics, all of those scenes are a lot brighter, have a lot more vivid colors in it, whereas the scenes without the psychics in it tend to be a bit more muted, a little more realistic looking, which kind of fits the vibe of the psychics being able to see more energy and more than the average person. While I really loved the artwork, I do think that this book is probably better read in the written version as opposed to the graphic novel. A lot of details were lost in here. I was a bit confused about how the world works because this takes place in our world, so I'm not sure the few little magic changes, how the psychics work, what the psychic's daughter's powers are. I think there's a lot that got lost in this adaptation. I also felt like there was a ton of backstory missing, so I didn't really understand any of the characters' motivations. While reading this, my connection to the characters and the world was very surface level. My understanding was very surface level, but I did really enjoy the art, and I think if I read the original series first and like it, I'll probably go back and read through the graphic novel versions afterwards, because the art is gorgeous to look at, and I'm sure it is a lot easier to appreciate it once I understand how it works. Overall, I rated this a 3.5 stars out of 5. The next book that I read is A Big Storm Knocked It Over by Laurie Colwin. I read this as part of the non-book talk book reading vlog that should have gone up last week. I won't really go into detail on this. If you want to hear my thoughts about it, you can go check that vlog out. Long story short, I hated the main character. I thought she was incredibly immature, and I ended up rating this a 1.5 stars out of 5. The next book that I read after that is The Poppy Fields by Nikki Ehrlich. This was also in that non-book talk book reading vlog. I will not go into detail about my thoughts on this. If you haven't heard anything about The Poppy Fields, I really liked this book. I enjoyed it a lot. This was such a relief after reading A Big Storm Knocked It Over. If you want to hear my thoughts on this, go check out my reading vlog. But this was a solid 4 stars out of 5. And then the last book that I read in September was actually an audiobook called Semi-Well-Adjusted Despite Literally Everything by Alison Stoner. This book is Alison Stoner's memoir, and it's about how they grew up as a child star and what it was like growing up in the industry and dealing with the pressures of being a child star. They do a really good job at highlighting how the industry can exacerbate body image issues, eating disorders, workaholism, perfectionism, and all of that. The amount of times that they were taken advantage of and manipulated was really heartbreaking to hear, especially because I grew up watching their work. I loved watching pretty much everything they were in. I think the thing that makes this book a little bit different from other child actor books is Alison focuses on highlighting how to protect child stars now. They have a podcast and a YouTube series that delve into these kinds of things and how to protect child stars now. And so while this book was very much about their life, it was also about how to learn from this and use it to protect the rising stars of today. Since this is a memoir, I don't really want to rate it. I only rate it if it's a 5-star memoir. For me, this just wasn't quite at the 5-star rating, but I still highly recommend. It's incredible. It was incredibly written. Their audio narration is really good, and I think we could learn a lot from everything they talked about. Moving on, let's go into the HRYCED 2.0. As I mentioned, I started HRYCED 2.0 on July 1st, so today is October 1st, which means this is officially the 3-month mark on this challenge. So let me show you where I'm at. This is the bingo board. This is what it looks like. There are 25 prompts on here. You have to complete all 25 to complete the reading challenge. So the first prompt we have is by the hundreds. For this prompt, you have to read books of varying lengths, book with pages in the hundreds, 200s, 300s, all the way up to 700 plus. I am saving this prompt until later because I think it'll be a little bit easier to kind of read through. So I don't have any books towards this prompt yet. For the 24-hour readathon, I did my 24-hour readathon while I was traveling on a plane for 17 hours, I think it was. During this, I read 3 books, The Moment Thief, Malibu Rising, and Happy Place. That I have fully completed the 24-hour readathon prompt. For subgenres of choice, you need to pick a main genre. I picked fantasy, and then read different subgenres underneath fantasy. The first book that I have is The River's Daughter, which is a mythological fantasy, and then I need 5 more to complete this prompt. For series Staircase, you need to read a solo, duology, trilogy, and a 4+ book series from start to finish. As you can see, I have completed the trilogy. I used the Beartown trilogy by Frederick Bachman. And then for the duology, I have read 1 out of 2 books. I've read Every Summer After, and then I plan to read its like interconnected standalone, One Golden Summer, to complete the duology. So for series Staircase, I have 4 out of 10 books complete. For the award season, you pick a book award and then read books that made it to different levels of that award. I picked the National Book Awards. I am waiting to see who wins for 2025. I believe that will be announced sometime in November. So I will read that there. But the National Book Awards only has 3 levels: the long list, short list, and then the winners. So for entrants, I have Surviving Antarctica Reality TV 2083, as this was nominated for, I believe, the Texas Blue Bonnet Young Reader Awards. Then the next challenge we have is the TBR Game Challenge. This is where you play a game that you've seen on YouTube and build a TBR from it and then read those books. I played a deck of TBR for my October TBR and came up with a stack of 5 books. I haven't read any of them yet since it is October 1st, but all those will go in here. The next prompt is the last 10 years. For this, you have to read a book for 2015 all the way up to 2025 or 2016 all the way up to 2026. The only book I have in here so far is an arc that I read called My Father is Calling the Neighbors Names. This is also a prompt that I'm not really going to do until the end of the reading challenge. I think it'll be a bit easy to find books that fit each of these years. Then we have the adaptations page. So for this, you can either consume the adaptation or read the source material. My goal for this is to do both any way that I can. So far, I have done 3, really 2.5, but I have done 3. The River's Daughter is a modern retelling of a Punjabi folktale called Mirza Sahiba. I have read both the modern retelling and the original myth. Then there's a web series here on YouTube called Call Me Katie that was inspired by The Taming of the Shrew. And then I have read The Help and plan to watch the movie if I can find it on streaming. For the disability challenge, you have to read 5 books that include a different disability. So the 3 books that I have for this prompt are Us Against You, which features someone suffering from PTSD, True Biz, which features multiple deaf people, and then Every Summer After, which features someone suffering from anxiety. Then we have the Heritage Months. You have to read a book that fits each Heritage Month. I plan to read these as the Heritage Months come in. I want to read it in the month of the Heritage Month. So the only one that I've read so far is Disability Pride, in which I used True Biz, because as I mentioned, this features a lot of deaf culture. Then we have the Translation Challenge. For this, we have to read 5 translated books. Beartown by Frederick Bachman is my first book in this prompt, as it was translated from Swedish into English. I have a few books on my TBR. I have one from Japanese, and I think I have a Korean book in here, but I need to find more translated fiction. So if you have any recommendations, please leave them in the comments down below. The next prompt that we have is the Around the World prompt. For this, we want to read a book set in each of the 7 continents. For North America, I have Made for Each Other by Lynn Painter. For Europe, I have Cluelessly Unscripted by Patricia Puentes. For Asia, I have 6 Days in Bombay by Alka Joshi. And then for Antarctica, I have Surviving Antarctica. Then we have the Even Bigger Rainbow Challenge. For this, you want to read a book whose cover matches each of the different colors. I have read a short story called Rearranged for the color yellow, 6 Days in Bombay for the color green, Cluelessly Unscripted for teal, Made for Each Other for purple, and Happy Place for pink, and then The Help for the gold. For the Make a Quote challenge, you pick any quote. I picked up Who Knocked Up Your Sister from one of my favorite movies, 10 Things I Hate About You. So far, I have 2 out of 5 books read. For Knocked, I read A Big Storm Knocked It Over. And then for Your, I have Yours Truly. For Spooky Creatures, we have to read a book that features each of these spooky creatures. For Spirit, I read The Raven Boys, which features a ghost. And then for Other Creature, I read Our Infinite Fate. Because of spoilers, I won't tell you what creature was featured, but I can tell you it didn't fit in any of the other categories listed. Then we have the Become the Avatar challenge. For this, we need to either do cover images or titles that represent water, earth, fire, and air. If you do titles, then it has to have those exact words in the title. But for cover images, it just has to have that element represented. For earth, I put a big storm knocked it over because it's very green. There's grass and trees all over that cover. And then for air, I put the Raven Boys because you see birds flying, which feels very air to me. For the readathon challenge, I have not picked my readathon yet, but you need to pick one and then complete it. I'm not sure which readathon I'm going to do yet. I was thinking about doing the Escape the Readathon that happens in May. I did it last year and it was really fun, but I'm not quite sure yet because that would be a lot of prompts, a lot of books for this prompt that I then wouldn't be able to use for other prompts in this challenge. Then the next prompt is Animal Friends. For this, you have to read a book that features heavily different types of animals, house pets, exotic pets, farm animals, wild animals, and zoo animals. For house pets, I have the Poppy Fields, which features a dog. For farm animals, I have Part of Your World, which features a pig. And for zoo animals, I have The Soul of an Octopus, which features an octopus in an aquarium. For Queer Alphabet, you want to read a book with a main character that is one of these identities. So for gay, we have The Winners by Frederick Bachman. For lesbian, we have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. For bisexual or pansexual, I believe the character was bi in The Poppy Fields by Nikki Ehrlich. Transgender, we have There Will Be Other Summers by Tegan Anderson. Non-binary, we have Semi-Well-Adjusted Despite Literally Everything by Allison Stoner. And then for gender fluid or two-spirit, I believe this character was gender fluid. And then for gender fluid, we have Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen. For the favorite HRYCED 1 prompt, we pick a prompt from the first version of this challenge and complete it. I chose 5 books from 5 small booktubers, TBR, under 5,000 subs. So for this prompt, I have read 3 out of 5. Book 1 was Happy Place by Emily Henry, which was recommended by Anna Robin. Book 2 was Know My Name by Chanel Miller, which was recommended by Heidi Ashton. And book 3 was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which was recommended by Chloe Elizabeth Reeds. For the BIPOC authors, we need to read 10 books by BIPOC authors, each from a different diaspora. If that's not what it is, that's how I plan to do it. The first book that I have is Know My Name by Chanel Miller, who is a Chinese American. Then we have the New Releases Challenge. So for this, you have to read a new release within 60 days of it being released. I am trying to read it within the month that it was released. So for July, we have The River's Daughter. For August, we have The Moment Thief. And for September, we have There Will Be Other Summers. For the Challenge Yourself prompt, you get to pick your own prompt and then complete it. I chose what I kind of call the literature challenge. So for this, I want to read different types of literature, a fiction book, a nonfiction book, some sort of poetry, an essay, novella, short story, play, and a graphic novel. So far, I've completed 3 of these. I've read My Father is Calling the Neighbors Names for poetry. I read the short story Rearranged, and I read the play The Taming of the Shrew. Then we have the nonfiction challenge. For this, you have to read 5 nonfiction books, each from a different subgenre or topic of nonfiction. The first one I have so far is The Soul of an Octopus, which is marine life. And then the second one is Semi-Well-Adjusted Despite Literally Everything, which is a memoir. And then finally, we have Cues, Reviews, and Recs. For this, you have to read 3 books that were recommended by Cordy, each from a different style of video. So one her mini review playlist, one from a full reading vlog, and then one from a YouTube short, TikTok, or Instagram reel. I have done one of these so far. I've read Part of Your World, which I saw her review in a YouTube short. Here is the bingo board as it stands 3 months into the challenge. As you can see, I've made a pretty good amount of progress for this, and I'm excited to see where we stand in another 3 months. I will give you another update once we hit January 1st. That'll be my halfway point for this challenge, and we'll see how much I've read and completed then. With that, if you liked this video, please like, subscribe, comment down below if you are also participating in the HRYCED challenge, or if you have any recommendations for some of these prompts. I would love to know. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!